Hello! Welcome to my first YouTube video. My name is Zainab, pronounced Zainab. I've been wanting to film this video for so long, but I've never gotten around to doing it. Hopefully this turns out well. Hopefully I put this out and not waste my time. You can't tell from the title, it's giving recommendations from a picky reader. I would call myself a picky reader, okay? I would say I'm more critical compared to most people who read books. I'm not like an ass, I'm not like annoying. I wouldn't say I'm annoying about it, but I am critical where most people aren't. I sound like such a douchebag, but like, I'm being honest. Okay, so don't come at me for being honest and open about my feelings. The books I have in this recommendation list, I have like 16. I divided them into like different genres. They're not perfect. Not all of them, at least. Some of them are perfect because I'm recommending them. I don't think any book can really be perfect except for like something that James Baldwin puts out. Besides that, they will have certain things about them, but in general, I think that they're great books and everybody should be reading these books. And if you don't read them, you hate me and you're a horrible person. So let's get with the first section, and this is my section that I love the most and section I read the most. If you can't tell by my fucking books over in the background, it's the fantasy section. The first one we're gonna start with is it's a standalone. It's an indie, like self-published book. So I think that everybody should at least give it a shot. The Sword of Kaigen by Emma Wang. Oh my god, I love this book so much. I think everybody who likes fantasy should read it. You don't read it more for the magic system, but you read it for the characters and the introspection by the characters and the developments and the redemptions, like all the arcs. Like, it's that type of story. It's not a type of fantasy where you hone in on the fantasy, but it's more kind of like a vehicle for the nuances about war and the patriarchy and mother and son relationships and things like that. Like, kind of how do these powers, these fantastical powers, play into these patriarchal roles. So it's kind of like Avatar, The Last Airbender, not the blue people. They can control water and water and ice. They live in like a small island area called Kikon, I think it is. Misaki is married into a well-known family in this area, like a lineage of warriors. They're very powerful, but Misaki has her own secrets, and you find those out as you read through. I love her. One of the best characters I've read in fantasy. Two perspectives. Her and her son goes through the pressures that the son has with having to be this great warrior, and then it goes into Misaki and how she is supposed to be this like feeble little housewife that has to just kind of be submissive, whatever, but she has obviously inner turmoil about that because that is not who she is. There are a few things I have nitpicks about, but it's not enough to drive me or you away. Okay, like I said, I am a picky reader. Most of these criticisms are not held by everybody. Few people I've talked to, they do have these criticisms as well, but the majority doesn't really care as much, so I think it's not that big of a problem. It's not like serious criticism, so like it really doesn't matter. Well, I was gonna say it's not that long, but for a standalone, it's just this much. Read it. Put on a good fantasy playlist, like Skyrim or Lord of the Rings type of playlist. You will love reading this book. Like, it has the best vibes ever. That's what I did when I read it, and I was so absorbed into the atmosphere. I think for most readers, they visually like imagine everything that's going on. Wong describes everything. I can see it in like a movie cinematic format. It's not purple prose, but it's just the amount of prose you need for a fantasy book. Probably one of my favorite books of all time. Fantasy books of all time. Yeah. And leading from The Sword of Kaigen, if you like The Sword of Kaigen, I think you will like The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Let me flip it over. If you like The Poppy War, I think you will like The Sword of Kaigen. And if you haven't read either or and want to get into fantasy, I think The Poppy War is a good start. It's a trilogy, not the most detailed in the magic system. It kind of is the focal point. I keep going back and forth. It kind of is the focal point, but the focal point is like The Sword of Kaigen, war and how it affects the characters and how the characters react. That's what it's about, mainly. It's not some like YA fantasy romance. Like, none of these on my list are really like that at all. I don't read books like that. So if you're looking for romance, this is not the place for you. But if you're looking for fantasy nerdy shit that has a lot of insane stuff, I think you will love The Poppy War. The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And leading into, if you like The Poppy War, go for Babel. And so much controversy has been happening about Babel and R.F. Kuang in general recently. Maybe I'm just too online and it's only an online book Twitter thing. But so much discourse. Yes, there are criticisms to be had about R.F. Kuang and some of the things she puts in her writing, but a lot of the discourse isn't really revolved around that. A lot of R.F. Kuang's works aren't the magic, the fantasy is not the focal point. The focal point is hardcore topics such as war and colonialism and, dealing with that. Babel has a very interesting magic system I wish we could have gotten more in depth with, but again, she doesn't do that. And it revolves a lot around literature, and it reads like an academic book, but not terribly boring. It's not super boring where you're like you want to fall asleep, but it's the right amount of academic. If you like reading informational stuff weaved into like a fictional fantasy setting, I think you'll love Babel. I think that this is a book for you. This is quite ironic considering that I'm saying I'm a picky reader, but I am recommending Babel and Poppy War, which are two books that have a lot of critique and a lot of things to be said about. Like I said, a lot of these books aren't the perfect books, but they are books I think are worth reading if you like this genre. If you like fantasy, if you like what I've talked about, I think you will really, really like Babel and Poppy War. That said, if I were to go back and reread Poppy War or Babel, I might not like it how I once did, considering that I read these early on as a fantasy reader. If I were to revisit it after reading a lot of more high fantasy, I think it'll be like, there's plot holes here and there, whatever, it's not as strong, but it does hold a nice place in my heart because I'm sentimental and nostalgic and annoying. But they're good. They're popular, they're known for a reason, so shut up. Yes, books can be mainstream and good at the same time. Anyways, now this one I've also seen a lot of criticism, even though I think at least on BookTube, a lot of people like it way more. It just, book Twitter has its nitpicks. It has its discourse a lot, way more than you would say about any other platform, honestly, just because it's so easy to argue with other people on there. But Jade City by Fonda Lee and the whole Greenbone Saga series is a trilogy as well, just like the Poppy War. Also, magic system, not the focal point of the series. The focal point is the family. It's kind of like a war mafia family. Yeah, it is. It's like a mafia family, two families warring against each other. A lot of discourse, a lot of familial issues, a lot of character flaws. A lot. You're not supposed to be like rooting 100% for these people. Some people I do, but not 100% at all. I think the way Fonda Lee writes this series is very direct and exactly how it should be written. She apparently majored in business in university, and you can kind of really tell with the way that she describes these political issues within the family. It's so interesting to me, even though I don't give a fuck about business at all. I do not care about business. I think the way that she writes all of these stuff is so interesting. I think the weakest book is probably the first one, and as you move on it gets better, but there's a little bit of a setback in the end. That's an unpopular opinion. A lot of people like the ending of the series. I'm someone that does not like it as much. It's alright. It's better than the most books I've read where the ending is complete dog shit, but it wasn't as bad. Especially because I watched a lot of anime, and anime notoriously has horrible endings, so just like the bar is here for me, so I'm easy to please about endings if it's remotely good. So that's how I am about it, even though yes, I am picky. I know I said that, but I'm picky about certain things. I honestly, like, I'm barely giving you a synopsis. Go look them up on Goodreads. Go look them up on literally anything ever. Don't take my descriptions, no matter how many times I've tried, are horrible. So hopefully you understand something about these books after this video. The last book I have on here for fantasy is The Will of the Many. I love this book. It's so far there's only one book in the series. James Islington is how you say it, I think. He's releasing his sequel this year, maybe later this year, but I loved it. At first, when I read it, I read the first like 70 pages and I was bored. Yes, bored. There's so much terminology that I don't understand because this one, compared to the rest, goes a lot in on the magic system and the lore and the world building. Versus a lot of the other books that I've talked about are more character studies. This one is a lot more about the magic and how the magic impacts the civilization. It's so interesting. It's not as introspective and I believe as the other books, but so far it makes up for that, and its plot and its action and its dialogue. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. And if you want to get into it, now it's the time because the sequel is going to be coming out soon and the epilogue is crazy. So you probably want to read it when the sequel is soon accessible because waiting like how I am, I feel insane. I feel like an insane person. So just keep that in mind. Whatever the fuck I said, just keep that in mind. The character we follow, Viz, he's kind of a character that is able to do so much, but he's not stupid, which I love because I'm sick of stupid main characters. I'm sick of them. I used to read, at least, a lot of young adult books, and I feel like the main characters are not nuanced or flawed, but just stupid. And at some point, it gets very frustrating. And I just love that Viz knows what he's doing and what he wants to do, and he kind of has this tragic backstory, but he's not set on revenge. He's set on surviving and, you know, being happy and living his life and not falling into the system that is exploiting people. And I just love a character that does not break his goals and his convictions, as obviously because I love One Piece. And Luffy's a main character that never breaks his convictions and his goals, and I just love seeing a character like that sometimes. Sometimes I get it that characters can be flawed, but other times you just kind of want us to root for someone and visit someone you can root for because he's smart and cool. But that's all the fantasy I have for you, and I do have only one sci-fi. I don't read a lot of sci-fi. I don't like the setting. I don't like the world building. It just feels so otherworldly to me, so I don't like it. I don't like the vibe of sci-fi. That's how I am, but considered sci-fi, but I honestly didn't feel like it was.
Hello?
The Psalm? I know it's like a biblical thing. I probably sound so fucking stupid right now. For the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is a novella, very, very short, but it is a duology, I believe. I haven't read the second one. I just read this. I just read it. I give it a 4.5. I did not expect to like it as much as I did. In the beginning, I felt a little bit off, but as I continued on, I'm like, oh, okay, I see. I get it. Because a lot of other books that I've read try to do these prose where they feel poetic and cool and stuff, but Becky Chambers kind of does it in a very natural way. She doesn't seem to be trying too hard. She doesn't seem to be trying to pull you into the setting and push these words into you. No, she's just describing the setting and you're absorbed, and it's very nice. It's about this monk. And they go through this kind of quarter-life crisis, and then they meet a robot. And it goes some very introspective from there. It's not set on the world building, even though the world is very, very interesting to me. It's not set on the world building, but it is set on introspection. And it kind of like made me a little teary-eyed. I read it on the plane, so I'm just like, I was trying not to look stupid, but it made me teary-eyed, and I just had to suck the tears back into my eyes. I think if you like introspection and you want a light read that will give you a little bit of a break from everything ever, I think you'll really like this book. That's all my fantasy and sci-fi. And now we're gonna get to some contemporaries. The last one is classics, which are very short because I don't read many classics, if I'm gonna be honest. Let's start off with my favorite memoir of all time, Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. I love this. I also cried to this. Well, I almost cried and then I had to not cry because I was reading it in the car. I'm always reading these things on the go somewhere, but I literally had a headache from how hard I tried not to cry to this book. This describes Michelle Zauner's life, and I didn't know this when I first read it, but she's in a band called Japanese Breakfast, which she writes about in the book, not like a promo-y way, but in a like describing her experiences and blah blah blah. They make good music. Listen to them from when she was a young age going to off into adulthood, and it mainly deals with grief. It's called Crying in H Mart because she has this ritual, or she had this ritual where she'd go into H Mart and kind of reminisce about her mother and cry. If you have like immigrant parents and you kind of feel this crisis with your identity, your cultural identity, and you don't feel like you belong in one place, I think this is very, very comforting. She describes things I didn't know I felt, and it made me feel very seen and understood. Like, that's the only way I can get you to read this, because it's so good. Even if you don't particularly relate with those sentiments, I think you'll still find a lot in this book. You'll have a lot of more empathy after this book. The way she writes is so nice. She writes very direct. She doesn't do anything. She's not doing way too much. Not trying to make herself seem super cool. It's just direct writing. And if you hate it, you're just a shit person. This is about her life. So in general, I've been really liking memoirs lately, and I've been trying to get into them more just because I love to read about people's lives and their interpretations of everything that's happened to them and where they are now. Because I'm 20 and I'm going through a quarter life crisis. Is it even considered quarter life? I don't know. I just know I'm going through a crisis. So I just think Crying in H Mart and reading a bunch of memoirs, if you kind of don't know what to do with yourself and you're going into adulthood, I think it's very comforting. I do go and read books for the escapism of it, but sometimes there are things that are helpful in non-fictions and things that can relate to your experiences. There we go. That's, I think, the only memoir I have on here. This one is probably a little bit unexpected, but The Little Prince by him. I'm not gonna try to pronounce it because I don't want to sound stupid. I'm Lebanese, but I'm not French Lebanese, so leave me alone. Is a fantastical little story that's a bundle of sadness and joy. I actually teared up to it. I teared up. Like, they have little drawings in here. It's so fucking cute, and I think everyone should read this. It is supposed to be for children, even though I really don't think a lot of children will understand the contents in this book. Like, I thought about giving my brother this book. He doesn't fucking read at all, but I tried thinking about giving him it, and I'm like, he's not gonna understand a thing in this book. I think a lot of kid books can be for adults. Don't judge people for reading kid books, because honestly, this shit was so fucking good. I know a lot of people read it when they were younger in the curriculum. We never touched this. Our curriculum was kind of shit, I'm not gonna lie. So we never touched a lot of good books, honestly. But I can't really tell you what it's about. It's about this little prince, proclaimed prince, traveling through space, kind of. It's very, very fantastical, very, what's the word? Dreamy? Like, I forgot what the fuck that word is. I don't know what else to say about it. It genuinely, I did not expect to like it as much as I did. Yeah. So, thank you to whoever told me to read it. I forgot who did. We got a nonfiction in here. We got a nonfiction. Actually, we got 2 nonfictions in here. No, 3. Crying in H Mart. Duh. I forget. So smart and cool and amazing. Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, I think is how you say it. I don't know. This novella? These letters? I don't fucking know. Oh my god, it changed the networking of my brain. I think this is a book everybody should reread. Everybody should read it at least once per year. Like, that's the type of book it is. It's very... Let me go back. Let me fucking rewind for a second. This is between 2 poets, Rainer and Franz, okay? Franz gives Rainer a letter and he's like, I need help, I'm sad, I don't know what to do, I'm stuck. and Rainer gives him all this advice, and Franz thought it was so unique and helpful that he published these letters. Most of them, at least, not all of them. And I got the version where it's 2 letters between each, like it's between Franz and Rainer, but you can also just get a book where it's just Rainer's letters, because Franz's is not really much, there's not much there except for him being like, help, help, ah. And honestly, I get it, weird one, but I like the back and forth. I like reading what Franz had to say about his letters and how it helped him. Like, it was just interesting to me. So if you find that interesting, then read the version with Franz, but you don't have to. It's not like a must read. This is also, I know I said this about, what did I say this about? I said it about a different book, but this gives you empathy. This gives you a different look in life, and it made me feel very happy in a time where I wasn't. So I think everybody should read it if they're feeling that way. You're welcome. I went from crying in H Mart to the classics, but I did not mean to do that. I still have more contemporaries here. So let me get to the contemporaries and then the last 2 classics I had for you guys. Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. I love the Irish! I love the Irish! Right? He's Irish? He's Scottish. Is that offensive? I'm sorry. I love the Scottish. I love the Scottish. Honestly, Scottish and Irish literature, I really, really like. This book is kind of in, is it set, I think in the 90s? Something like that, 2000s? I don't know, but it's not set in this year. It's kind of the Catholic and Protestant discourse of the time. Mungo falls in love with the Catholic, which is a big no. And there's like this whole thing, 2 timelines. So Mungo getting to know this boy, and then Mungo after knowing this boy and what's happening to him, which is so interesting to me. It's so interesting, but there are trigger warnings. Honestly, for all these books, there's trigger warnings. So look them up at your own discretion and make sure you're warned before you get into these books. The flow of conversations are so natural. They're so, like, they're not trying too much, not trying to push a certain theme onto you. You just get it through the characters' actions, through the characters' back and forth. Ugh. It pisses me off how good it is. It pisses me off how he kind of wrote such a good mother and daughter relationship too, because why is a man writing so good about a mother and daughter relationship? We're moving on from Young Mungo, and then I'm gonna go back to the classics after. This is so messy. Baritone by Frederick Bachman. I love Frederick Bachman. I love him. There's criticisms to be said about the way he writes kind of everybody and everyone in the fucking universe, and sometimes it gets a little much, but most of the time it's a hit. It's not a miss. About like, whatever character, side character that's looking at someone from the trees, just read it. Read it. Does not matter, okay? Stay with it. I promise it's going to get better. Search it up, please. Search up the trigger warnings. He writes a lot of different perspectives from a lot of different characters with different situations, and I love it. Sometimes, like I said, it's a little much, but most of the time I really love it. And this is a trilogy. Guess what? I didn't read the last book yet. I love the sequel. I love the sequel, but I haven't read the last book because 1, it's a little more dense than the others, and 2, I'm going to cry. I already know it. I already know I'm going to cry. So I want to hold it off until I'm in the right headspace to do that. I know there's a cult following of him on Twitter with my mutuals. Hold on, I will read it soon, just not now. So this, if you love characters, read it. If you don't love to only mainly follow characters, maybe not. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you'll find it a little boring actually, but I loved it, and I love his other books. I loved Man Called Uwe, and I loved that one novella that's very has a long title. Forgot what it's called. Something Long Way Home. I don't know, but I love it, and I'm excited for his new book this year called Just Friends, which I fucking applied for the ARC. No, I did not hear anything back. You didn't even decline it, because I would have rather had a a decline versus feedback whatsoever. Fucking rude, but whatever. This one I think most of you did not hear about. Most people on here, it's not as recommended as the rest of these books I've recommended. In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. This is a debut novel, which I can only wish to write a debut novel like this. Oh my god, it's I read this at work. I read it at my old job. As soon as I left work, I just continued reading it, and then I finished it all in one day, and I cried and I was scared, and I loved it. This is about war. A lot of these books are about war, honestly, but this is about war. It's about World War I? Yes, it's one. It's the First World War. It follows these two guys who are British. I know. They're British, right? Am I making shit up? They have to be British. Henry Gaunt, Sidney Elwood, they're British. No fucking American has that name. If you do, you're not real. They go off to war, and it follows them. She apparently is a screenwriter, which you can tell. You can tell by the way she writes. She writes dialogue so fluently. Like, she's so well versed in it already, and I just think this could translate so well into a movie. Please, please. Same thing with the Poppy War as an anime. Please, I'm begging you. And if you make it into a real life one, I'm setting that studio on fire. Not a lot about the war itself. It's about the characters and how they're going through this and surviving. Because oh my god, there's so much surviving. And the relationship is so good. Anyways, last contemporary, I think. Let me remember. I think that's my last contemporary. Let me get back to the classics. Let me get to the one where I actually don't have a physical of. Madonna in a Fur Coat by Alice someone. I can't say the last name because that'll sound stupid. But he's a Turkish author, and apparently he's hailed as like a really great author in Turkey. I haven't heard of him until recently, until I've seen a lot of people talking about this book, and I was like, let me give it a try. Like, Madonna in a Fur Coat, that sounds like such an interesting title. And I read it, and oh my god, like, I read it this year. It was the second book of this year, and I loved it so much. I read it so quickly too. It's about this guy. This is one of the few books I have in here that's kind of about it is about romance and yearning. So much yearning. Actually, In Memoriam is also very romance heavy too. This guy who is seemingly so boring, and he fades into the background, but then the narrator, kind of like main character guy, reads these letters he found in his desk, and we're reading these letters with him. He is like the ultimate yearner ever. Men don't exist like him anymore, honestly. I really don't think they do. Or men literally just need to shut up. He finds this painting called Madonna in a Fur Coat of this woman, and he gets obsessed with it. And he finds this woman, and they have this romance and these introspections. And this author wrote the average experience of like a woman so well, of like literally just the anger and the misunderstandings, oh my gosh, and the frustrations. Like, I was so shocked. It was like a man from the 60s or 40s, I don't know, wrote this, which is crazy, and kind of it pissed me off, because I'm like, why are you writing this so well? Makes no fucking sense. If you're not used to classics, or they're not for you, this really is not like other classics I've read. It does just enough. It does just enough. I know a lot of classics will go on and on and on, but it doesn't do that. It's kind of short. I think it's 200 something pages, or maybe 100 something pages, something like that. It's not too long at all. So Madonna in a Fur Coat, please read it. I'm gonna join these together because they're by the same author, James Baldwin. He's probably one of my favorite authors of all time ever. I made it a goal for myself to read at least one book of his per year, because there's so much you could derive from every book of his. And he's just like, his brain, oh my gosh, his brain is crazy. He writes so beautifully, so insanely. So the prose are not purple prose, they're not doing too much. This one is a fictional, this one's a non-fiction. This is kind of like, it kind of is like a collection of essays, Kind of. It consists of 2 letters, but they kind of read like essays. They're very, very dense in information. It kind of revolves around like race and class and his experiences with it and his perspectives on it. And he just has so much knowledge in that fucking brain. Giovanni's Room is a romance book. Surprise, surprise. It's a romance book that I cried to on the plane. Yes, I do that a lot with these books, but I've cried to it on the plane. And he writes so beautifully in this as well. I think this is his most known work. And rightfully so. It's so fucking good. It's amazing. He passed away in like the 60s, 70s? I could be totally off. But these are all set in like the 60s, 50s, things like that. So they're obviously characters facing a lot of prejudice from other people. Yes, it's in France, so you best believe in the 1950s, they're going through some shit. I'm not a romance connoisseur, but the relationship. I love James Baldwin so much, so please read it. Please. I think that's it. Those are all the books I have for you today. Holy shit, I have no idea what I just fucking said. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you understood something that I said. And I hope you take all these recommendations because they're good books. Let me know which ones you have read and that you like. And if you don't like any of these, mind your fucking business and don't let me know because I don't allow. This is not a democracy. This is not a democracy. So I'm kidding. If you have some opinions about these books, please let me know down in the comments below if you've gotten this far at least. But thank you for watching. Bye.